welcome your host, Mr. Sidney Roundwood.
Hello, and welcome to the TooFatLardies Oddcast. I'm your host, Sidney Roundwood, and I'm joined today by the two gentlemen behind TooFatLardies and Von Reiswitz Press, Nick Skinner and Richard Clark. Gentlemen, welcome to the Oddcast.
Hi, Sid. Morning. Lovely to see you, mate. We haven't seen you since New Year's Day, shockingly.
Is that
true? Wow.
Yeah,
it's a rare appearance. Yeah, I've been busy, and I know you both have as well. I mean, we've got a packed postbag and program tonight, as this is an Ask Sidney special. But before we fly into the postbag and the various emails we've been getting, I wanted a chance to catch up with you about what you've been doing. I know, because we've talked about it and I've seen things on Patreon, that you've been going to Germany for a fairly significant battlefield tour. So, Nick, how about you tell the listeners and viewers all about that?
We did, Sid. We went off to, we flew to Dusseldorf just after we'd been to see you in Panto, and you were excellent, by the way, may I say. Thank you very much for the tickets. Your family really appreciated the tickets. It was really funny.
Always.
The outfits were great, mate. Superb. Anyway, we flew to Dusseldorf because we were headed to Gielenkirchen.
Well, we thought we were.
Yeah, there's an in joke in there somewhere. Thanks to Sausage Fingers and the Sat Nav. We were supposed to go to Gielenkirchen, but thanks to Sausage Fingers and the Sat Nav, we went to Gelsenkirchen for the first 20 minutes and had to do a U-turn. But we were there to film for Patreon. I guess what we used to call the Battlefield Challenges, but we kind of dropped the Sydney bit because we didn't think anybody enjoyed that part, so we just went with the two of us going out to their Operation Clipper, which was the combined British and American operation to seize Gielenkirchen in November 1944. So, of course, the Allies, they're blunted at Arnhem. They turn right and push into Germany from that direction. And the Americans launch Operation Queen to the south, and Horrocks with the 43rd Wessex Division and the American 84th Division launch Operation Clipper to seize Gielenkirchen. So we were out there for 3 days. It was a real full-on trip, filming, and what's coming out of that is at least three episodes that we're going to be putting on our Patreon, which is explaining the battle, walking the ground, and then turning it into something that you can put on your tabletop. It was good fun, wasn't it, Rich? Good trip.
Yeah, it was excellent, really good. And we've released the first part of the Gielenkirchen trilogy, although I think it's going to be a bit more, really, because we had an episode of the reading room where we looked at the books that we were using for research. So what we're trying to do, we've recently done a whole series. It was about 8 episodes on Panzer in Normandy, which wasn't just the history, but it was actually about how we undertook the research for a pint-sized campaign or scenario. So we went through the whole process from literally trying to find the relevant books that covered that unit, and we've done a very, very similar thing here. And also we've done some stuff. I've got some stuff filming about building the forces for it, because it's a winter action. It's November 1944, and it's incredibly muddy. So I wanted to do my Yanks in greatcoats. So I built a whole new force for that, which I've got some film on. But yeah, so this was a case of doing a similar thing, looking at how we did the research, how we prepared for it. We've got some articles on there about how we use maps, how we use contemporary maps, how we use modern maps, and how we put together a list of where we're going to stop, where our stands are. So it's very much a case of not just looking at the history, but looking at how we do the research, how we prepare for a battlefield tour, and then how we produce some scenarios on the back of it. So I've got a scenario coming out next week, which is follows up on the first video, which was the action of the Americans, the 334th Infantry Regiment, on the 18th of November, the first day of the action. And there was some really interesting fighting that went on there. So we've got a little scenario which we're gonna put out on Patreon. But what we're looking to do is develop a 2 or maybe 3 pint-sized campaigns covering the whole thing, and they'll be available for people to buy. But it's nice to be able to produce that extra bonus material, which is what Patreon allows us to do, where people can see behind the scenes. So yeah, really good actually. Interestingly, I've travelled a lot in Germany in the past, and there are a lot of places that were knocked down during the war, unfortunately. And most of them have been rebuilt incredibly to show the original look. Beautiful buildings have been recreated. That never happened in Gießenkirchen. It looks like a German version of Stevenage. And I don't mean that in a nasty sense, but I'm talking about that concrete 1950s, 1960s Stalingrad type look that you got with the brutalist architecture of the period. It's not a pretty place, but we had a lovely time, and we were made really welcome by our the German hosts in the hotel we were staying at, which was all, a bit of a flying visit, but it was fun, and it was really interesting to put the history on the ground and get the drone out.
Yeah, that was good fun, Sid. You should have seen the drone. More importantly, you should have seen Richard with the drone. It's like a kid with a new toy.
I spent both nights there doing paperwork to get my drone flying license, and having got my UK drone flying license, being told that it wasn't applicable in the EU. So I had to sign up and get an Irish Republic drone license, because that's the only other country that did the test in English. So I had to get an EU drone license. So I didn't get a lot of sleep while we were there. But the drone really adds a little. I mean, we didn't use it as much as we should have done, as it was only available to us on the final morning that we were there. But in future, going out, we're going to be able to get some great footage as a result of having that little arrow to our bow, or whatever the expression is.
That sounds great. That sounds great. I did see the footage. It did look fun. Sounds like a really good trip. And we've got one question coming up about the trip from somebody who emailed in, which is great, and various sort of other questions. But before we move on to the Ask Sidney section, we have Salute coming up with a lard zone, and I wanted to ask you what was on the menu for that.
Well, super exciting. We've got 3 top games. There's Joe Bilton is going to be there. Excuse me, running a huge water tanker game, which is going to be featuring the table that some of you might have seen that he ran out at Hearts of Lard. But he's actually, rather than playing Chain of Command on it, he's going to be putting together water tanker on it. So it's going to be an absolutely beautiful table, but with early war tanks. And that's going to be about 17 foot long. So it's huge. Actually, Joe is catching the eye of the hobby press. Wargames Illustrated ran a piece online about how he builds his tables, which I thought was really good, that he was getting recognition there. So that's going to be a real one for everybody I've spoken to with kids. Has said we can't wait to come down to that and get the kids on it. I think Joe's created a creche for himself there, but no, only kidding, folks. But yeah, it's he's got a real crowd puller there, as they say. We've also got Dave Brown there, of course. Dave is going to be there with his forthcoming Ancients rules, Vexillarius. He's going to have them on display, and he can answer questions about how those are going in terms of development. Lots of people are going to say, when are they available? And the answer is when they're ready, because the process is a long and tortuous one when it comes to editing and layout. So that's there. Nick, you wanted to say something?
Well, Vexillarius, I don't know. I'm no scholar of the classics or Latin, but Vexillarius sounds like something that's not just funny, but really, really funny. So it's not just hilarious.
Not
it's
just hilarious. It's Vexillarius.
It's a great game. It's such a good game. It's Vexillarius. Sorry, Dave.
Good. Right.
Well, we'll look
moving
forward to
on.
that.
Moving on, we've got a really exciting game of Chain of Command there, which is not just based on, but replicating The Eagle Has Landed. And that is run by a good friend of ours, Peter Ellis, who's from down on the south coast near the Isle of Widget. And he's going to be running that with RKX Miniatures, who produce some of the fabulous figures to go with that, including German Fallschirmjäger in British para helmets. So absolutely straight out of the film, which is going to be great to see. And wow, buildings! Collectible 3D print files of recognizable buildings is their strapline. And these will be recognizable because these are the classic buildings from the film. Who can forget the mill? Who can forget all those classic buildings that are there? So if you have ever fancied being Michael Caine in a German parachute, I can't do that because I've got a cold. I can't do it normally, but I really can't do it when I've got a cold. The opportunity is there to come on down and dip your toe in, have a go at Chain of Command. They've got a whole team of people there. All wearing beautiful shirts, which we've had done for them, which would be nice. So, yeah, lots and lots going on. And of course, probably the biggest news of the year is Chronicles of Midgard is going to be released at Salute. Now, this is the campaign and scenario supplement to go with Midgard Heroic Battles. We are going to be releasing that there as an early release. The release date is actually the following Thursday, but it is going to be available there. You can, if you want to advance order, you can do that now and pick that up at Salute. If you do that, we'll have that ready for you. Come and find me and I will hand it to you with you having already paid online, which is handy. And that allows you to buy the bundle, which includes the PDF. So if you want the book and the bundle, you can buy that in advance. You won't be able to buy that at Salute. You'll be able to buy the book at Salute, but not the bundle with the PDF because we literally can't link the system in with that. It just doesn't work like that. So yeah, that's going to be there. We're going to have that there. So that's going to be a huge release. And obviously all your other favorite rule sets, General Dame, Chain of Command, Sharp Practice, will be available, and Emma and I will be running the trade stand. And of course, if you fancy touching a celebrity, Sidney will be there, and he'll be charging 50p a touch. I think that was right, wasn't it, Sid? Did you say that?
Who touches who?
I think we should move on from that. There's not really much I can say for
But
that.
we will be there. I mean, Rich, I'm going to be there because I'm not allowed to go to Cloglard because it's Salute. But we won't talk about that. But I'm really looking forward to it. Absolutely, it's going to be really good fun. I'm going to be there with Sid. I think Sid, we're going to try and get a breakfast in beforehand.
We are, as ever. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. We'll get a nice breakfast in somewhere. Some avocados will be smashed at some point somewhere in North London, and we'll be there. And I'll have the camera. We'll be doing some filming, do a bit of roving reporting as we go around, capture Sid in some of his clinches with his fans. So come and see us, come and say hi. And yeah, Lard Zone sounds really exciting.
Yeah, lots of really, really good stuff. I mean, huge tables, huge celebrities running those games. So and a roving Sydney. What more could anybody want? So yeah, it should be really, really good. So we hope to see you there.
Wall-to-wall fun. Well, if you are at Salute, please do come around and say hello. It's a great event, and we're looking forward to it. But now let's head to the workshop because I think it's looking rather nautical.
But nice.
So here we are. Here we are in well, it's either Portsmouth Dockyard or the workshop. But either way, I'm not at all disappointed because this looks like a veritable Spithead review. Lots of ships under full battle sail, all cleared for action. Do I smell Kiss Me Hardy 2 in the making, maybe, gentlemen?
Yeah, well, that's what's driving this flurry of shipbuilding. We, as some of you may know, we had Charlie Walker. Let's go further back. Charlie Walker has approached us a few years ago. Nick had some ideas about producing a second edition of Kiss Me Hardy. And we were really, really busy on some other stuff. And Charlie came to us and said, look, guys, can I take this and start developing it? I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. So I'll edit that out. Charlie came to us a number of years ago and said, can I take this and run with it and start developing these ideas? And we said, yeah, sure, please do. And we've seen it happening around various Lardy Games days and different War Games shows, and it's been looking really, really exciting. Well, we had him down last year, might be 18 months ago, actually, to do a workshop with us. But unfortunately, Charlie was taken really ill. I mean, he really was. And it wasn't anything to do with hospitality on Lard Island. He picked up a horrible illness on his farm because he's a farmer. It nearly killed the poor sod. Anyway, he survived. And if there's a message there, it is that he survived in order to bring a new set of Napoleonic War Games rules to us. So we had him down the other day and we played through the game, and he said, what do you think? And we said, look, this is finished, mate. This is finished at the point where it should be going out to playtest groups. So the first thing we need to do is playtest it and get the rules into the format that we want to go out to the playtest groups. And of course, that means getting it on the table here at Lard Island. So I've been frantically trying to get a force together of 1/700 ships from Warlord. If you're watching on Lardo Vision, this is how a third rate looks when it is in its embryonic form. So there's a third rate ship of the line, 74 gun probably. And I've been building those up and sticking them together rather frantically. So that's hence the nautical look, mate. Hence my timbers being shivered and my planks being warped and my things being somethinged.
Well, it's really exciting, actually, Sid. We played it and it was excellent fun. I mean,
It was
I think
great fun.
what he's done really nicely is just taken all that kind of record keeping out of it, which is superb. Dashboards and dice is kind of I guess what you say about it. It's a much smoother, faster. I called it the Steve Austin the Steve Austin version. Stronger, better, faster.
Which is a reference that people under our age probably won't get. But I've played it at T-Ball Lard and actually a couple of other times. It's great. It's terrific. It's really, really good. So
it is good. What he's done that is really, really clever is he's got rid of you get +1 for sailing because you're French, you get +1 for gunnery because you're British, you get +1 for this, +1 for that. All of that has gone because it is reflected in target dice scores, and it really does feel like all those factors are there, but he's done it without them being tables and tables of adjustments, which is really good. Really clever game design. Very impressed, actually. Very impressed as somebody who's written the odd rule set. But I've also been doing other stuff. I've been doing the 84th US Infantry Division, which I bought a load of plastic Warlord US troops in greatcoats, and then thought, why have I bought these plastic figures? They just break. And I replaced them all with artisan US infantry in greatcoats. But I have used the plastic ones for some gun crews and weapon crews and things like that. So a plastic box of plastic figures is never wasted because there's always things you want to add. So that's been good. I've got these on my desk literally in front of me, which is Napoleonic stuff for sharp practice, because we're doing some work on sharp practice on non-player characters, which I think we're going to talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, no, don't spoil that surprise.
Don't spoil it. I've also been taking some war bases, MDF buildings, and doing them up a bit for 4 Spanish buildings. So this is a very early part of the process, but you can see I've been using a lot of polyfiller on there and trying to get these buildings. Trying to get MDF buildings, which I always feel look a bit too dimensional.
That's a really nice building, Rich. That's from the Peninsula Range, is it, from Warbase? I love the pergola on the back there.
So do I. Hold on, mate. Let me just show you this one, which is a bit more developed. This is not that one. They have quite a few in the range, which what I like about them
This is just great viewing for everyone, isn't it?
Uh,
Half of you
well,
looks
have a
like
look
the
at this. What
Invisible
I
Man.
like about that, small footprint-ish,
Yeah, it
but
is.
it's obviously a little Spanish farm. You get
Yeah.
so many buildings that are big, prominent statement buildings. What you want are just little small holdings and things like that, which have a small footprint, but it's where the bandits are hiding or the guerrillas or whatever. And that they produce a really, really nice range, which I think don't get enough attention. So I've been doing some work on those. I've been filming the build project on Patreon, which has been good fun to do. I've learned a lot of lessons with these, and to be honest with you, I messed up about 4 of them learning those lessons. But there you go. I'm thick. It takes me time to learn lessons. So yeah, I've been doing that. What about Nick? You were telling me about something to do with dice that you've been looking at.
Oh, what the
Tower.
sorry?
Towers.
Towers, yeah. Well, I've not had a great start to the year. We've had loads of domestic stuff that's kind of kept me away from the workshop, really. But so I've not been able to do very much. But I picked up some really nice dice towers. I know this is a really weird thing to talk about, perhaps in the workshop, but some quite plush, fold up dice towers. Because I thought whenever we go to games, and also when we're filming games as well, you want dice to be under control, right? If you're playing a game and the dice are all over the table, we all like a nice, neat table. Um, so I picked up these dice towers, and they're really very plush and very smart, and I'm really pleased with them. I haven't got them to show you.
Well, that's interesting because what I've been thinking about, we produce a TooFatLardies dice tower. But what I've been thinking about is taking a dice tower and sort of combining it with a building like this, so that maybe you had a little farmyard here, and you put your dice in, and they come out. So the dice tower itself becomes a terrain piece. Because as Nick says, when you're filming, you want to be able to put the camera and show the dice results to people. You may laugh, Mr. Roundwood, but
There used to be a game in the 1970s when you used to build a haunted house, and there was
yes,
various witches, and
yeah.
Ghoulish Gertie used to drop it down the chimney, which was this ball bearing. So this is a 2026 version of that.
Ghoulish
Um,
Gertie drops them. Sounds like a great name for a game.
something like
Now
that.
that is a great idea because for my dockyard, my Second World War dockyard, I've got a lighthouse, and the lighthouse is about 3 foot tall. So you can have a little helter skelter for dice that goes
You could,
put it in the top where the light isn't, it comes out the bottom where the lighthouse keeper lives.
but yeah, I like it. I like it. I like the idea of combining the dice tower with a piece of terrain so that it doesn't intrude on the table, but it does allow you to have that area, especially for us filming, because we're trying to do that. I mean, that is another thing actually at the moment. We're trying to get a studio created which would allow us to film more often, film games, but we're just trying to make that happen in our business unit that we've got. So we'll see. At the moment, it's full of boxes, it's full of stock. But there we are. That's a challenge in its own right that we'll try and address after Salute.
But one thing I want to say, Sid, about the dice towers and the ones that I've got, they're lovely and plush, which means that when you roll the dice in them, they don't make that horrible clattering noise that you so often associate with
Yeah,
dice towers.
plush
So,
dice
Rich,
towers.
yeah, so Rich, whatever you do, you should line your dice tower, your terrain dice tower
Yeah.
with something that deadens the sound.
You don't like that sound? I always think that the sound of
No.
dice rattling over a PVA and sand table is that quintessentially wargamey from the
It's the leather
1980s and
on
1990s.
it's the leather on willow of wargaming for you, is it?
But it's not, is
That's
it? It's
right.
plastic on plastic, and it just sounds cheap. I
Yeah.
think whenever you get the kind of rattle that goes with dice towers, I can't
Yeah.
stand it. If
But
it's if it's an earthy low
yeah.
roll, that's okay. That sounds more like plastic on felt, which is a much
Enough,
nicer
enough,
sound.
enough. We've lost half of our
Maybe
audience
maybe
talking
in
about such
Humberside,
nonsense.
the rattle of plastic sounds classy.
Enough. Enough. People have had enough. What have I been doing? Thank you for asking, Richard. I've been very busy. I've been very busy. I've been doing various sort of different things, painting sort of small figures for Fashion Blades, and also when the last solid is drawn. But I do want to make a big shout out to a friend of Lard and a contact on Blue Sky, Pat Gilliland. In the States, Pat. I hope I've said your surname correctly. Pat has been doing something really interesting with pre-dreadnoughts. He's been shrinking them down to a 30 mil or 25 mil hex format to test the naval theories of pre-dreadnought warfare under the Jeune École, which was like the war of the good, of course, of the French against the English in the late 19th century. The French and the English were both preparing for with construction of French harbour at Cherbourg and the expanding English fleet. And rather than create a huge arsenal of pre-dreadnoughts, Pat very skillfully recreated the image of the pre-dreadnought ships and shrunk them down so you can 3D print them. So Paul's printed me the ships, and Pat's produced a very practicable set of naval vessels to be able to recreate very quickly and very cheaply and easily some of the naval tactics of the late 19th century. And that's really interesting because it is a period of naval revolution, which was the bedrock behind the larger fleets which came into place in the early 20th century before the dreadnoughts. There was a really concerted argument that you didn't need to have huge capital ships. You could have significant forces of torpedo boats and torpedo boat destroyers. And there's a very nice, interesting parallel with some of the theories which are going on in the South China Sea at the moment related to Taiwan, and some of the US naval publications have looked back to the late 19th century relating to the different theories which evolved. So rather than fiddling around with expensive ships and rigging, Pat has shrunk down these vessels to a really, really nice size to place on anyone's coffee table or dining room table, or perfect game for a game cafe. So Pat, thank you very much for that. There's something which I didn't really understand a lot about and still started reading about it, but it's going to be a really nice diversion. So I painted those up and I'm looking forward to getting them in the water for the first time. So that's
interesting, isn't it? Actually, if you look at the Russian Black Sea Fleet has been completely neutralized by the Ukrainians, who don't have a navy, who actually just have drone boats. So we're almost seeing a parallel there with the idea of the motor torpedo boat being the foil to the large battleship, and that's what we're seeing now, isn't it? And also the whole issue of warfare changing dramatically as a result of conflict in Ukraine and other areas. But that's another issue.
And all of those kind of points where warfare really changes and it's revolutionized was really interesting. And the changes from one huge weapon system like Ship of the Line from the Napoleonic era to the dreadnoughts, and what happened in between, period of transition, really interesting. So thanks again, Pat. But that's enough from all of us. But we do have candidates for best bit on the bench. Richard, what was your best bit on the bench?
Well, I bought these paint pens a while ago, AK paint pens, and I thought these are brilliant, and I used them a bit, and I thought, no, they're not. They're not. Anyway, I started doing these ships, and I thought, I know, why don't I use these paint pens? Because I can do that. Details on the thing. And I thought, these are brilliant. And then I thought, no, they're not. So I was thinking about putting them out as the best bit on the bench, but I've got to the point where I've gone back to using a brush. So they're not that impressive. Do you know what this is, Sidney?
I don't.
What is it?
My old friend.
No idea. Super glue.
Super glue, right. And do you know what this is, Sidney?
More super glue.
Super
glue.
Do you know
accelerant,
what this is,
maybe?
Sydney? And this?
Super glue.
Do you know what's universally true about these 4 bottles and another 20 that I have? The bloody tops are glued on and I can't get them off. So these are full of super glue.
Wow.
I can't access it. And it's really, really annoyed me. So what I did, I took a revolutionary approach and bought these. These are super glue, more value for your money. 24 times 1 gram single shot. Little tubes. Oh, sorry, little tubes. What you do is you obviously take them out the
inject them
packet
directly,
and you put the lid on, and that gives you a tiny amount of super glue. But I've just based up about 40 figures for sharp practice, and it used one and a bit of these. So what you do is you use them and you throw it in the bloody bin. And if the top sticks on, it doesn't matter because you've got another 23 of them here, or whatever the figure is, 20 of them. And I just think going away from buying big bottles of super glue that end up getting gunked up and this, that, and the other, to these small, really, really disposable things has made my life so much easier. Now, I know that's a trivial thing, but this cost me about £4. And you use it, and if it gets gunked up, you just throw it away. And I thought it's a tiny revolution. It's a leap. It's a quantum leap. The leap is so tiny you can barely see it, but its effect is significant. Now, I know that's a bit of shit, but I'm really pleased with these. I'm really pleased with them. And as a way of purchasing and using super glue, these fit my needs a lot better than these bloody things. People said to me, use Vaseline around the tops and do this, that, and the other. I've tried all that and they just gunk up. And consequently, I've got gallons of super glue trapped in these bottles that I can't use. So that is my best bit on the bench. Although what I will say is I've got to do a shout out to Warlord Games ships, the Black Seas ships. These are not perfect. There are some issues, but in terms of putting them together and getting a ship of the line on the table, these are lovely, lovely bits of kit. The idea that 25 years ago, this is a repeat of a process I did 25 years ago with metal Langton ships in, I think they were 1/1200. So these are significantly larger. That's good. They're significantly easier to see and easier to make.
the metal ones are beautiful when they're done, but they can be a real pain to put together.
They were a nightmare, and I was having to use super glue, wouldn't cut the mustard. I was having to use resin-based.
You've got to use araldite,
Yeah, that's right. Whereas this, you just use your plastic cement,
nice.
and Bob's your aunt is living lover. And you also get spare bits. So if you want to represent wreckage, masts, it's all on there.
It's nice.
And their packaging comes with sails. It even comes with thread for the rigging. It comes with rat lines on acetate sheets that you cut out and apply. It really is a one-stop shop in terms of modelling. Now, I have seen some criticisms online that sails are set in a specific position. It's a bloody war games toy. It's not a model for people who are interested in modelling Napoleonic ships put in a glass dome. And as a war games toy, they are superb, really good products. But do they beat these? No, because these are perfect.
All right, Nick. Anything else?
I haven't got anything for the bench seat apart from my dice towers, which are plush.
Wow.
I know you like plush.
I do like plush. I've got something. I've got a green stuffed tentacle roller. Gosh, why would I need one of those? It was great.
Which tentacles are you rolling?
Tentacles.
Tentacles, right?
Yeah, no, various Japanese monsters and all sort of things for basically a hybrid of a bit of fun for maybe something around about a festive season. And these are great, but they could also be used for sort of wires and cables and things like that. You know, when you're sort of making things from scratch, you want to kind of have a long wire or a long cable or somewhere for futuristic games, or maybe a tentacle for some sort of Cthulhu game. Anyway, Green Stuff World do a great tentacle roller, so you can roll out the tentacle and it comes out with really impressive sort of tentacly rolled little bits of, I don't know, rolls on tentacles, but they're all indented in different ways and they look wonderful.
Do you think
so I've really had fun with those. I didn't know there was a song connected.
Roll out the tentacle, we'll have a tentacle of fun.
I will
how
post.
Does it work? I can't envisage this.
There's two rollers, so you place them like that, and you put the green stuff in between, and you just gently roll between them, and it turns out some fantastic sort of tentacles, which are even angled at the end. It's really, really nice, very clever.
How
long? Can you not use your fingers to do this?
Well, of course you could, but then you've got to carve the indentations on the snake skin or the sort of like worm-like tentacle, or if you're doing a coil for something mechanical, then obviously you've got to have that really precise as regards how you sculpt the green stuff. And whereas the tentacle roller saves you a lot of time, and it's a bit of fun. It's a bit of fun, a little bit like your multiple bottles of super glue, Richard.
They're not
Lots
fun,
of
mate. They're practical. That's not
Best
fun.
bit of advantage doesn't just need to be practical. It can be fun.
I'm intrigued about you rolling your.
I'll bring them down. I'll bring them down to the club this week. I'll bring my tentacles down.
Sydney rolls his own exclusive.
All good stuff. Enough of that tomfoolery. Do we have a winner? Mine. Yes. Great. Let's move
All right,
on.
well done, Sid. Who could stand between you and your tentacles?
Exactly right. Let's move back to the studio and get cracking on our postbag as it's overflowing with questions instead of this sort of waffle. Let's move there now to the sofa of sincerity. I don't think we've got one particularly for asking questions, but sofa of sincerity. Why not?
The couch of curiosity.
Ooh. The recliner of rumbustiousness.
Right, here we are.
The chaise lounge of interrogation.
Well, please have a seat on our respective chaise longues of interrogation. I've moved over here to my own chaise longue, as I think some of the questions need, well, it says on my script, contemplation and thought, but maybe interrogation is a better way of putting it. So let's have a rummage and see who's first out of the bag.
Right. Are you reaching with your tentacles?
Well, the first to be attracted by my long green stuffed tentacle is great friend of the show, Jeff Bond from Wales. Welcome, Jeff. Come on down. So Jeff asks, what are your thoughts on the third dimension in wargaming, notably height, especially hills and folds in the ground, and the inherent difficulty in representing them on the table? Especially when we compress the ground scale. The larger the area, the more likely we might have a view over a wood, for example. But it's rare on the gaming table that that's represented. So, gentlemen, what was your thoughts on that question? Very good one.
Depends on the game, doesn't it? Depends on the ground scale. Because if you're playing Chain of Command on a table that's 240 yards by 140, you're unlikely to see over a wood. You're just about going to see over somebody's geraniums. So it is a difficult one, isn't it? And Nick, when we were out in Gielenkirchen, one of the things we found was that the hills marked on the map as being prominent hills, weren't. It was flat. If you were on a bicycle, you would have said it was flat. No, that's not quite true, actually. If you were in a car, you would have said this is flat. If you were on a bicycle, you would just about identify that you had to pedal a bit harder in one area rather than another. But you would certainly, for example, where those three pillboxes were, do you remember where we were just south of that football pitch where you had a piss? Oh, no, I wasn't going to mention that. Sorry. That they were meant to be on a spot of high ground overlooking and dominating the area, which they were.
That's where I always go for a piss, on a bit of high ground dominating the area.
Right. Good. Well, I hope the court case goes well. But yeah, it in many cases, high ground is not a hill. It's just a point from which, because you are, let's say, 2 or 3 meters higher than somewhere else, you have a better view of the world. But the terrain in front of you is essentially flat. So that is an issue. But yes, hills are important, and we do tend to iron them out of our games of Chain of Command, specifically because the area of terrain that we are covering is so small. But if you're playing a more classic Napoleonic game, General d'Armée, you're more likely to see them because the battlefield is much bigger, and consequently the terrain features are going to increase in scale as well. But Sid, go on.
It is interesting though when you do read accounts of very small level action like platoons, those micro terrain items, where guys gather in sort of dips and folds in the ground, culverts and disused drains and stuff like that, they become really important.
That's the bit
Yeah.
that is more difficult. That's the bit that we need to be modelling more efficiently. It's not the fact that you're on a big hill, I'm in a big valley. It's the fact that the ground in between us undulates and is not as flat as the table we're playing on. To a degree, we responded to that in Chain of Command by creating the option to move tactically, which means you are taking advantage of those folds in the ground. But it's one of those things almost that you, as a game designer, you cannot write rules for every piece of terrain there is in the world. We've been having a look at board games, Nick and I, and we're continuing to do so as part of a little side interest project. And one of the beauties of designing a hex board game as opposed to a tabletop war game is that your terrain is very, very clear, and the impact that it will have is very, very clear, because you are either in that hex or you're in the next hex. And if you're in that hex, all these effects apply. And if you're in the next hex, another set of rules apply. On a tabletop war game, we don't have that certainty. You could be in a wood and in a ditch. You could be in a field, but in a sunken road. And all these things we have to take into account. So I often think that all we can do is define terrain types, and that then allows the gamer to have a toolbox, if you like, to represent their tabletop in the way that they see fit. So I often think that terrain of this nature is probably best reflected by scenario specific notes. So for example, the scenario that I'm running out for Gielinkerken actually involves those 3 pillboxes and the entrenchments around it. And there's an issue there where you need to take into account the fact that if tanks were actually going to engage the steel embrasures that protected the troops inside the bunkers, the way they did it was they moved to within 10 feet and fired directly at the embrasure with an armor-piercing shell. Because if they were doing it from 30 yards away, they couldn't be accurate enough. So, but do you want to create that as a normal rule in Chain of Command that says drive up to 4 inches, 3 inches away, and you then get this special effect because you're over egging the pudding? You're making the rules far too complicated based on circumstances which are going to be very, very specific to a small number of actions. So you can't make it a general rule, but you can do that for that particular scenario because you're reflecting that something that happened historically. And I think to a degree, how do we reflect hills? Well, it's more about reflecting advantages, lines of fire. You want to be on a hill because you get. Dave Brown addresses it in O Group, where if you're on elevated terrain and you're a machine gun, your range is extended quite significantly and considerably. That's an interesting way of doing it. It's one way of doing it. In Chain of Command, well, would it be possible to create specific hotspots on the table that give you better fields of fire? Yes. Would it be possible to write that into the rules? No. You can do it for a scenario, but not.
I think to go back to Jeff's question, Sid, the gold standard here is sand tables. So, most of our tables are flat. We can do hills easily enough, but we can't do anything that goes down. We can't create a furrow. We can't create a sunken road. So I think the sand table is still the gold standard in this. Who do you know has got a sand table? Absolutely nobody.
No.
Well, you don't use it as that though. So
Not often, no.
No, that's right, and very, very rarely. And I think that it is something that's the best way to do this. Rich is right. In close quarter games like Chain Command, you don't get a lot of. It doesn't really matter because a tree is in the way, no matter whether you're uphill or not. But I think I'd like to see more ability in our games tables to have more height. I was thinking about sunken roads, making sunken roads the other day. How do you do that on a table? You have to build up the terrain to then have a little dip. It's kind of tricky, isn't it? But you can do it.
What I have been thinking about is the fact that your standard wargaming hills that you get, maybe what was that company called that used to do polystyrene terrain? TS, Total System Scenic,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
Their hills used to be, I don't know, inch and a half deep or whatever.
yeah,
You put them
yeah.
on a chain of command table, and you've got one person's down here, the other person's up here,
Up a cliff.
and they just look wonky. It just doesn't
Yeah.
look right. What I've been thinking about is using 1 centimeter MDF, not MDF, yeah, MDF, to create or high density polystyrene to create much flatter hills. But when I did it, you put it on the table, you can't see it,
Yeah.
so it's almost pointless.
But
You
it does
know?
create those little channels through which people can, those little gullies through which you can move,
Well,
defilade and stuff.
when I did my late war 1945 fall of the right terrain, if you remember, I did all the buildings on garden bases
Yeah,
and fields on bases, and the
yeah,
reason for that was that then created drainage ditches
yeah,
between
absolutely.
them, and that is something that I have always found difficult to create on the war games table. But that was a really important part of those games, and I first tried that in the Netherlands in 1940
Yeah.
with some Fallschirmjäger games there, because I wanted to produce that third dimension that Jeff's talking about. But it's not easy. But
What's next then, Sid?
Very good. How do you learn new rules? Asks Gary Taylor. Slightly different thread. How do we learn new rules? Just play them? Just read them? But both? Osmosis? How do we do
I
that,
think,
Nick?
well, yeah, I don't know. It's a little while since I've done that actually, but I guess where most people start, I guess, with you buy the rules, you read the rules, and I think the key thing here is playing something simple. Um, I think what I see quite a lot in particularly in Chain of Command is people trying to go too deep too quickly, which makes the learning process I think quite difficult. Having starter scenarios, start with something simple. That's the way to learn it, and then only when you feel confident with the basic mechanics should you move on to more complicated stuff. It's kind of you don't start your driving test with parallel parking on day one. And so why would you do that in a war game? So I think probably it's you know, learn it slowly, right? Learn the process. It becomes much more natural if you do it that way.
I totally agree. I'll never forget a guy saying, "First game of Chain of Command, and we did it, and then the King Tiger arrived." And you think, "Oh, in the name of Christ, honestly!" And then the artillery bombardment came in, and then blah blah blah. And you think, just don't do it. Just put put two vanilla platoons on the table. That's why scenario one or mission one is the patrol.
That's right.
Because
Game one. How do I deploy from my M1 half tracks under a
yeah.
mortar barrage during a smoke screen
You
at
are
night?
just making it really difficult for yourself. Just play it really simply. It's interesting, actually. I've just bought a couple of sets of War Games rules this week, and because I'm full of cold. I feel terrible, and I thought that'll give me some bedtime reading. Anyway, it arrived yesterday. I went to bed because I felt like shit, and I got the book out and I started reading it, and I went, "I'll give up."
Yeah.
I think what you've got to do, you've got to be in the zone. You've got to have a clear head. You've got to sit down somewhere quietly, and you've got to read the book from beginning to end. And don't try and play the game at that point. Just read the book.
There's something to be said, isn't there, for that type of learning? It's a bit like a video game. You start off the video game, it's pretty straightforward, and then they add different things in. There's a bit of a narrative. I think war games writers want to create rules for everything because people are going to ask for rules for everything, and by the time you finish with a set of rules, it needs cutting down. Some rules do get cut down, and some don't. But as regards to scenarios, you've got to start with a starting scenario. I remember when we did Stout Hearts and Iron Troopers, the 6 scenarios we picked were really, really straightforward, and they were kind of like an iterative learning process. And if you play the games in that order, then the first scenario is challenging, but it's really simple, and then you sort of go on from there. And if you like the game, you keep playing the scenarios. But you don't start on the thing with everything involved and 3 or 4 different platoons and big cock, and it's just not necessary. Unfortunately, people paint probably more than they play in some respects, or some people paint more than they play. So the big temptation is to get it all out on the table.
I want my
And
toys
there's,
out. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I've never been a great
Exactly.
believer of that, but views differ. But I
Yeah,
think it's
well, it's
best to start small.
interesting, isn't it? Stout Hearts and Iron Troopers, we actually used the training manuals from
We did.
the First World War and recreated them as war game scenarios so that people could go through the same
Yeah,
learning
same
experience.
learning experience.
And people who did it said how much they enjoyed doing it. I mean, that first scenario is a really interesting scenario to play through. And adding a tank does not make it better.
Adding a tank does not in the First World War make anything better, but that's a different discussion. And let's move from the First World War to the Second World War, because Tom Boyd,
Yeah.
Peter Ware from Perth in Australia, and Benito in Madrid have all asked about the progress about Go Commando, Nick. How are we doing on that front?
Right.
Hold on. Peter Ware. That's the poshest Pete Ware has ever been addressed in his entire life. Good day, Pete. He's a lovely bloke, Pete. I don't think anybody's ever called him Peter.
I
Commando.
I don't know Pete. Pete very well. Mr. Ware, hope you don't mind me being polite on our first meeting. Nick.
Well, Mr. Ware, Senor Benito, and who else, Sid?
Mr. Thomas Boyd. To you, Richard.
Well, it's Go Commando is in really quite an exciting space, actually, because although I haven't been in the workshop since Christmas, I have been in the mental workshop, and so we've had some. I've had a chance to get some stuff on paper about Go Commando, about where we got to it before the end of last year, and it's at the stage now I'm really quite excited about getting back on the table for some play testing. It's very much one of those games, actually. I intend to have it where you do have a kind of start with a small mission and get bigger, so we can very much help people to understand their awareness of it. But I've just had something 3D printed, actually, by the Genie, which is there is without giving away too many secrets. The idea is there'll be a part of the game, I think, which is going to be called synchronizing watches. Obviously, you synchronize your watch before the mission starts, don't you, Sid? You know, where you make sure that you all do things at the same time, and that's going to involve quite a kind of a commando clock face. We just had the clock face 3D printed. It looks like a big force morale tracker, and quite excited about getting that on the table quite soon to do some more play testing for it, because also there's loads of figures coming out that seem to look really good for Go Commando. A lot of the 3D printed figures. I've just seen some German Kriegsmarine, for instance, who are perfect for a bit of Go Commando action around the dockyard. So I'm really quite excited to get back into it, and we will be doing that soon.
That's great news. That's great news. Randy from Alabama, moving on to the next item. Guys, I've recently listened to or watched several wargaming channels on YouTube where they say that random movement was discussed, and the general feeling was that it should be ditched. Got rid of completely, and fixed movement only should be used, which is why I thought we'd come on to that. Nick, I know you're busting to mention, but I'll finish Randy's question first.
Right.
Will you be following that advice in future rule sets, Nicholas?
No, because it ain't random. Random is the word used by people who don't understand it. It's not random at all. It's not a random movement. It reflects the fact that you don't know how far you're going to get before the enemy gets a vote.
It's only random when you roll 1d6. You only roll 1d6 in chain of command when you are moving tactically, trying to find, the protected spots in the ground. Well, that is random because you don't know what the ground's like, particularly that you're advancing through. You're being very, very cautious. After that, it becomes predictable, but it doesn't become certain. I think it's interesting. I think there's a really interesting point here. I've actually seen a couple of these discussions going on online, and people saying, "Oh, we hate random movement," as they call it. Do you know what mechanisms I hate, Sydney?
You're going to tell me.
No, I'm not. The answer is you don't know what mechanisms I hate, because I don't bleat on about them the whole time. There are quite a few mechanisms out there that I don't particularly like. But what I don't do is go around telling people who are using those mechanisms that they're wrong. There does seem to be a group of people who dislike who dislike movement that isn't a fixed distance, and they're quite happy to preach to everybody else, telling us all that we're wrong. No, we're not wrong. We're doing something that you don't like. Just accept the fact we're doing something different to you and stop telling people that it's wrong. The reason that we use it is how, when you're about to run over that road to try and get to a building on the other side, how far are you going to get before the enemy opens fire? You don't know. But if you've got a 6-inch fixed movement, you do. You can cross that road. Nobody's going to shoot at you. It's perfectly safe to do so. In reality, that isn't the case. In sharp practice, very different game, which is all about narrative. We played a lot of games when we were younger where it was a race to the bridge in the middle of the table. But we knew who was going to get there first because it was a fixed move of 6 inches, and the side that went first would get there first because it was equidistant. What's the bloody point in that scenario? Whereas in sharp practice, yes, you can try and go faster by stepping out and using your cards to do that, but it really is a race and there's a tension to it. Using variable movement allows different things to happen in different games, in different situations. Will we be following their advice? No, bugger off and stop criticising things you don't like.
And it also talks about the relationship between time as well. It takes time as being, the relationship between what happens and the time scale, dare I say it. The time doesn't work like that. My day, I don't experience my day as a linear process. Some parts of my day go slower than others. This part of my day might feel more slow than what I do after lunch, for instance. But it's the relative time is relative, right? That's the whole thing about it. And I think in war games where we take too predictable a stance on it, we just remove the life from the game. And the risk is we do that.
Well, that's a good point to stop, because I don't think I've seen anyone quite as steamed up since the Tennessee Volunteers played the Auburn Tigers recently, Randy. That's an Alabama joke, which Randy will get. But I
Have
think
you got any other Alabama jokes, Sid?
that was the best one I could think of quickly. So, Randy, it's a great question.
I did wonder if Randy in Alabama was a follow-up to Down and Out in Paris and London.
No, he's probably either a Tennessee Volunteers fan or an Auburn Tigers fan. But Randy, thanks a lot for the question. But we are going to move from this kind of unexpectedly fraught and excitable Richard on that question of random movement to the much more calm and serene and beloved surroundings of the Netherlands and our friends over in the Low Countries, because I've got messages from various of our friends in the Netherlands. I've got one from Jasper, one from Yer de Jong. Hi, Sydney. Rich and Nick use salute as some kind of excuse not to come to Cloglard, but that shouldn't stop you. We could surely use some of your flamboyant nature to spice up our down-to-earth event. And Ian also asked me exactly the same thing. Could they persuade me to come in the future? Well, I can't make it this year. I am otherwise booked on the weekend of the 11th of April, which is when Cloglard takes place in the wonderful Netherlands. But I will make sure of making a point of coming over for next year. So thank you very much for that invitation.
Yeah, we're at Salute on the 11th, of course. So if you're bonkers enough to organise your game day in the Netherlands on the same day as Salute, don't be surprised when we can't attend. But it's sad because we had a fabulous time last year, and my missus loved it, and she is really annoyed that we're not able to go this year.
Yeah, very much the same here. I'm absolutely gutted when I found out the tour on the same day, and in fact, I'm under a 3-line whip that Salute is the place for me to be, but my heart, to some degree, will be in the Netherlands on that day.
Not Alabama.
No, well, a bit of my heart's in Alabama, although it's never been. I'm sure it would be. But yeah, well, I hope they have a great day. Hope they really have a great day. But sadly, we can't be there.
Well, just a follow-up from the Netherlands, and I tried to put it more diplomatically that we were otherwise booked, as opposed to the fact that you'd pick the same day as Salute. But moving on from that, also asks, what is our advice to players who want to make the step from playing to hosting games for others, explaining rules, setting up the scenario without looking like it's an insurmountable challenge? What have we got as advice for new players, Rich?
That's a really good question, isn't it? it's a difficult one, but I think like everything, the answer is keep it simple. I've been to war games events where the person running the game has given a précis of how the rules work for half an hour before the game begins. And honestly, I think you're overloading players with information. I've also gone to games where people hand out the play sheets. Apparently, this is very popular in America, not so much here in the UK, but they hand out the play sheets so people can work through the rules. Um, I honestly think, again, too much information. If you've got people who are regular players of the rule system, by all means do that. However, if you've got people who you are introducing to the game, really the easiest way I find to do it is to say to them, right, here, your unit's been activated. What are your options? What would you like to do? And then tell them how they can do that in the rules. I think the first piece of advice is make sure you know the rules yourself. I went to a Lardy Games day once, and the person running the game didn't know the rules. And they had as it happens, they had a whole table full of people who didn't know the rules either. And that was a bit of a disaster, and somebody had to step in and run the game for them. You can't do that. You have to know the rules, and you have to know them well before you should even attempt to run scenarios for other people. You need to be in a position where knowledge is power. And if you are not seen to have that knowledge, all your power evaporates very, very rapidly. But yeah, keeping it simple, explaining things as they happen. So when you roll for force morale, explain how force morale works. Don't do it until you get to that point. When you do your first force morale test, explain the range of outcomes and results that are possible, and say for different things, this can vary. So a tank being knocked out would see this, whereas the junior leader being killed is this. But only discuss the rules when you are at the point where they are being used in anger. Don't try explaining to people how the rules work, because it's just information overload. And if you give people, truly believe, if you give people a play sheet, all you are asking them to do is argue with you. And if they don't have that information, they can't argue with you. As long as I knew a bloke who was a German teacher who'd never, ever spoken German, and he blagged his way into the job. And the way he did it was he made sure he knew about 10% more than the kids he was teaching by swatting up a couple of lessons in advance as he went through the learning curve. And he got away with it. He absolutely got away with it. The school employed him actually because he was really good at cricket. But he needed to have another subject to teach. So he chose German because he reckoned none of the senior teachers would speak German. But so as long as you know 10% more than anybody else, your authority is there. But if you provide them with information that allows them to question that authority, you're going to be exposed as the charlatan and fraud that you are. And you know what that's like, Sid. It's not pleasant.
It's a high risk. It's a high risk strategy.
You have to be a guide. You're not telling them what to do. You have to guide them. So it's a kind of an approach to it. And also you have to take some of the decisions away from them, I think, at the very beginning. So I've seen players become overwhelmed when you ask them, for instance, to choose their own support option. It's a lovely idea. We might go into a game and say, I've got all these different options for support. Which one do you want? And the guys who are playing the game don't know which one to choose for the best. So you instantly make them feel anxious and kind of confused. So actually sometimes you need to tell them what they've got, ask them what their intent is, what are you trying to achieve, and how the rules will help them support that, and then do everything else that Rich has said.
Control phase
recognize that players make mistakes, and I think the key thing then is to learn from them and then not tell them what idiots they were for doing it that way. I mean, we've all seen that style as well, and that doesn't work.
Yeah, you're setting people up for a fall sometimes, and you should never do that. You should never do that. We often, if Nick and I are running a game, we will often, for example, last year at Salute, Nick and I were running Chain of Command, a game set in the Netherlands, funnily enough, at Oosterbeek Laag. And what we did was we played the patrol phase between us. so that we could show people how it worked. What you can't say to people who've never played a patrol phase before is now play the patrol phase, because they will fuck it up, being blunt.
Very good. Okay, well, some great words there for you. I hope that's very useful, as I know
Yes.
you enjoy running a game. Anyway, John Harris has raised a really good question. I've returned to wargaming after an absence of 40 plus years. Don't judge me. The changes in the hobby are staggering. Changes must appear more incremental if you've not been in the hobby during that period of time. What are the ones that seem most significant to us? That was a really good question, because sometimes, nostalgia is a great thing. And we talk a lot, the three of us, about how wargaming has changed, how you can keep it fresh and relevant. Historical wargaming as opposed to just gaming, which is a point we might return to if we've got time later. And I think it is a really interesting question, because the games we played 40 years ago are very different in some respects to the games we play now. The people we play with are actually the same. Physically, they are very much the same in the same geographical area. But the games have changed. And I would also say, John, that the way in which we play games has changed. But Nick, I know you're eager to contribute to this question.
Well, I was just eager to say hello, John, really, and send him best wishes, because I know that he's been through a lot in the last few years, and it's great to see him and to see that he's got a question for us. For me, I'll tell you what, Sid. What I feel is a real sense of overwhelm at the moment about terrain. I think what's really changed in the hobby, if I came back to it now after having left it 40 years ago, it would just be the sheer volume of stuff that I can get my hands on to create my little battlefields with. It's. I was looking again before we came on air, looking at some more stuff that I'd seen from 3D printing. I mean, it's absolutely it's really changed the way we play our games and the things we can put on it. Anything, we've said this a million times, anything you wish for you can have. There's always something more to grow, to add to the collection. It's not just that one farmhouse or the one set of walls. Once you've got a river, is that enough to have a river? Once you've got a farmhouse, you've probably got about 500 of them. So I think that's the massive change, I think. And also, I guess the games we're playing, the sheer range of, I mean, who would have dreamt that badgers and bulldogs would be, it would be one of the things that people would be spending a lot of their time on in the modern hobby if you left it 40 years ago. So what remains of historical wargaming is really quite interesting. I'd like to see what John's thoughts are himself on how that's grown and been different.
Interesting point, actually, because our club started 43 years ago. So I was actually gaming 40 years ago in the same place that we all game now. And I tell you what, the terrain looked like then. Every table had part of the Airfix Waterloo farmhouse on it, because that was just about the only terrain that you could get, were the Airfix model railway buildings that we all anybody of our age vaguely remembers. But they now, by comparison, we discovered this when we did the Arnhem build a few years ago, when we first went over to Arnhem, that we were able to use 3D printing to add a lot of detail to wooden boxes that we made. Now those days have gone. That's historical. You don't even bother building a wooden box and using 3D print to add detail. Just get the whole bloody thing 3D printed. You can actually create anything you want. So the idea that all the buildings on the table look like Normandy, or more to the point, Scaledale, sort of a Yorkshire Dales model railway world, have gone, and you can actually create buildings that look like what they are. That's remarkable. So from a consumer's point of view, who would have thought we'd be buying plastics? Because 43 years ago, when we started at the club, if you were playing with plastic figures, you were rather sniffed at, because you're not a real wargamer unless you've got metal figures, because it shows, Christ knows what it showed, commitment, I suppose, to actually spending a few quid. People tended to be looked down on if they were using plastic. So that's changed now. From a commercial point of view, from a business point of view, which is slightly different, I think the shift towards gaming rather than just wargaming has been the biggest shift, as Nick's already highlighted. 40 years ago, even 25 years ago, even probably 10 years ago, at the War Games Club, you would only get war games played that were about war. Now you will get beavers and ostriches and this, that, and the other. So there's pressure on wargaming to hold its own in an environment that's increasingly about gaming.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, good question, John. Thank you very much for that.
A very good question, actually. All the questions have been first class.
We will return to that in due course. Another good question here from friend of the show and friend also, good friend Charlie Walker. How much do we feel that war games rules design leads trends or follows them? Really good question there, because I think there's maybe a bit of both. But Richard, you've got views on that, I can tell.
Well, it is a bit of both, isn't it? I mean, I was reading a war games design book the other day, which said that, modern game designer, the pressure is on to make rules more simple. It removes the barrier to entry. You've got to create a game which has an incredibly low barrier to entry, because the rules are simple enough for people to pick up and understand on their first play of the game. On the other hand, I would say that if that is your only objective, you're in danger of creating games that are simplistic and don't have replayability to them. Because actually what you want to do, I think, is create games that have replayability, that make you want to keep coming back, because they are easy to play but hard to master, or whatever the Billy Bullshit term is. So I think there is a tendency in game design to say, let's do it that way because that's what people are used to doing. So if we really, really try hard to replicate what people have experienced in the past, they'll be able to pick up the rules and run with them as quickly as possible. I think the problem then is all you're really doing is reskinning another set of rules, and creating something that is the same game but with different figures. I have strong opinions on this. I think if a game is going to have longevity and be attractive in the long term, it needs to have inbuilt challenges that are just as challenging 10 years down the road as they are today. That the battlefield is a difficult place to command in. You shouldn't be able to master it in a couple of games. But that's different to making them complicated.
Well, I think the other thing that, Charlie's saying about which leads, the game design lead or do the games themselves lead and game design follows. You kind of got these two cycles, haven't you? The game design cycle of let's put it really simply, if you go from big game to small games, and then what rules do we see now coming through for big games? What rules do we see for small games? What kind of games do people want to play? Where do people see that there's a market, I guess, for want of a better word, for games? And I guess game designers are guilty of thinking about what do people want. I mean, certainly when we're making a decision about what do we do, what games designs, what rules do you want to put forward, I guess we do think about, well, actually, what's going to be received, what do people want to play, and that is trying to keep tune with where you think people either are already excited or could be excited. And I guess the games designer's got the responsibility of responding to that need and also creating it. So they kind of go together. I don't know that really answers Charlie's question, but they are two cycles that fuel each other into creating something that people want. So you get the games that we play, and then people like those games. Games designers will continue to design games that people like.
Okay,
Why don't you design a game that people don't like?
I'll be a bit more specific then. How about this? I think that a lot of game designers think that game design is led by gamers, and that gamers want them to create a different game that plays the same as an existing game. I don't think that's the case. I think game designers should be driving this process by saying, what is a fun way to create this game? What is a fun way to create this period of warfare? We don't have to replicate what's gone before. We can introduce different and interesting challenges. But what we shouldn't do is just go through a mundane process of saying this end product replicates that style of warfare. It has to be, this is a good game that also replicates a style of warfare.
Yeah, I agree with that, but it has to have something that appeals, doesn't it? Because
Oh, it does.
I'm sure I know for a fact there are a million great games out there that people aren't playing because they just don't have the appeal, or they not have the ability, the reach, the ability to connect with the potential audience. So I just think the two are really closely linked because people have to have an awareness and an interest and a desire before they actually make that commit to a purchase. So you can either create that, and I think, successful games designers can do that to some degree. But it's also about being responsive and recognizing what is there and what space is there to create those games that give people what people want.
Some very good thoughts there. So we'll leave that on that point back, Charlie. I'm sure we'll come back to that in due course. So it's a kind of perennial theme, but really at the heart of some of the things that the guys are doing. But before we leave that question, Nick has a
Well,
follow-up.
I just want to say to Charlie, because Charlie, don't forget, is a person who's developing a game. Don't worry, Charlie. People are busting to get their hands on the Napoleon-enabled KMH2. So you've got nothing to worry there, mate. Whether you're leading it or whether you're riding the wave, doesn't matter. Just get the rules to the point where more of us can play them.
Well, other people busting to get their hands on something are John Mitchell, Christopher Smith, Scott Miller, and Andrew Holmes, all of whom have asked a question which varies in respect of either Flashing Blades or When the Last Sword is Drawn, also incorrectly titled Bonsai Bonkers. I'll just read out Scott's. Scott says, definitely interested in any status updates about Flashing Blades and Last Sword. Having looked at the range of offerings on TFL's Patreon, is there any particular topic or series you'd feel would best be added to this stable, perhaps by yourself? And John Michael says, been waiting for these games for years. What's happening? Any update? So, Richard, we were talking a little bit earlier today about where things are in that design process. The design process is still going on. Don't make any apologies for that, because we have played a lot of games of it. But one of the themes that you're doing in Sharp Practice is something that we thought would actually work in the very small footprint games, which I've been working on. Richard.
Yeah, one of the things that we're looking at, and Sid and I have been talking about this, is you see it in Sharp Practice and you see it in Bonsai Bonkers, Flashing Blades, whatever you want to call it, is that not everybody on that table actually is a combatant. You get, I hate the term, but let's call them NPCs, which I thought was National Car Park, but there we are. But they're non-player characters, which I realise is a different order. One of the things you get in a lot of games with NPCs, and certainly in Sharp Practice, they are kind of like, yeah, you can have them in there, but we're not really going to tell you what they do. So one of the things that I've been looking at with Sharp Practice, and one of the reasons I've got these figures in front of me that I've been dabbling with while we chatted, is is looking at more formalising the relationship between the troops on the table and the non-combatants on the table, and trying to develop a system which would give us a structure for allowing you to have a conversation with the innkeeper and getting a plausible outcome, or allowing you to have a conversation with a peasant in a field and getting a plausible outcome. And Sid and I have been discussing that as something that we can look at for well, not just any one system, but we can try and make it a universal, at least a universal scaffolding upon which we can then build specific rules for skeleton, probably a better word than scaffolding. A universal skeleton upon which we can then flesh out, if we're going fully medical, we can flesh out for each specific rule sets. So Sid's got those rules at a point which I think is really interesting, in terms of, we know the combat works, we know that works, but let's try and crack this relationship between combatants and non-combatants in a plausible manner, and then we can apply that in a number of settings. So that's like all these things, one of the reasons for developing a set of rules is that it creates ideas that you then have to test. And you might decide, I'm never going to publish that set of rules. But there was stuff we learned through doing that has provided us with ammunition that we can fire at a different target in the future. So what we are very keen to publish bonsai bonkers and flashing blades. And also, I'm very keen to put together a handbook for dealing with non-player characters in sharp practice. So we're not doing this as a purely theoretical exercise, but it is a good exercise to do, and I think it will enhance both systems. So still in development is the answer, but that doesn't mean we're not doing anything. It just means that we're still working on it, because it's an artistic rather than a mechanical process. It has to take its gestation period is unspecific, unfortunately.
And talking of another artistic process, Larry from the wonderful British city of Brighton asks, in an artistic frame of mind, all things being considered, cost, attractiveness, word of mouth, professional finish, how do you feel, Richard and Nick, after using a freelance art director on Midgard and Chronicles of Midgard? Obviously, the great Johnny Hodgson. I'm assuming you'd do it again, but what would lead to making that decision?
Okay, well, we have done it again because we've just done it for Chronicles of Midgard, which is coming out absolute, available for advanced order now. So we have done it again. What led us to make that decision? Chronicles of Midgard is a very different set of rules to anything that we've ever published before, because whilst it covers heroic warfare, which has its roots in history, but also applies to a more fantastical or heroic, legendary stance. I think it would probably be true to say, and I think James would agree with me, that when playing Midgard heroic battles, you're more likely to be representing history or battles of legend rather than fantasy. So, the classic legends of the Norse legends, the Irish legends, and so on and so forth. So we decided that if we were going to produce a set of rules in that arena, we had to do it in a manner that really reflected the existing market in the world of fantasy and so on and so forth. You can't produce a set of rules that doesn't look absolutely top drawer if you're trying to move into that marketplace. And I think we've been very successful in terms of doing that. There is a cost involved, and the cost involved comes directly off the bottom line. But you're in that trade-off situation where you have to say, actually, if we don't make this rule set look really good, we won't sell to its full potential anyway. So you have to view that as an investment. So would we do it? Would I do it for Chain of Command 3? Not that there's going to be a Chain of Command 3. No, because I think I'm perfectly capable of doing the layout and a set of rules for Second World War. Would we do it for General d'Armée 3? No, because General d'Armée 2 got a lot of accolades for the way I'd laid it out, and that means you're operating in two very different marketplaces when you go into the world of sort of fantasy, and it's expected. So we did it for that reason, and I'm pleased with the outcome. And working with John at Handiwork has been brilliant. He and I get on really well, and I think we've established a really good working relationship where I just say to him, "Hey, mate, this is what I fancy. These are some of my design concept ideas," and he just takes it away and runs with it and makes it work. So that when you have that type of working relationship with a creative person, it makes life an awful lot easier.
Very good, very good. Well, still on the production side, and I think this is something that both of you would be able to add into. Let's look at lots of the questions about Chain of Command. So we've got Adam Warren saying, what's in the pipeline for Cock 2, post-Margate Garden, more 1945 or some Eastern Front? We've got Mike Wayne saying, can we expect a Cock to North Africa handbook? And Gotch and Van der Brink and Dick Bryant in the US are both saying, what's the status of the handbook for the Pacific, the second Far East handbook? Looking forward to hearing plans for any upcoming pint-sized campaigns. So I think it's a general sort of ask for a description of what's in the pipeline for all those different things, Nick.
Well, I can't answer the question about all of those, Sid, but I can talk about the Market Garden, where we are with Market Garden, because that's, I know it's becoming a bit of a running joke, but it's getting closer inch by inch. And I'm waiting some feedback from Rich about some content that we can then move forward again with that. There's so much stuff going through at the moment, so many wheels, so many plates being spun. But I think I feel stuck. I really want to get Market Garden through and out because to be honest, it's kind of stopping me moving on to other stuff as well. So nobody wants to move it forward more than I do.
Okay, I can give you more chapter and verse on that. Market Garden, we spent a lot of time waiting for Nick to produce the goods. Nick's produced the goods and he gave it to me. I took it to Australia and did a full edit on what he gave me with notes about what he needs to do to get it structurally correct. And it didn't save. And I need to go through those documents again and do exactly the same edit again. But there is a psychological barrier when you've done something once and it goes completely tits up to going back and doing it again. So it's entirely my fault that I haven't done that. And I have got it in my diary for this week. I got back to the UK at the beginning of February. We're now at the end of March. I should have done it sooner. It won't take that much work, but I need to get that back to him to say, this structure needs to be changed to go like this. This structure's perfect. So half of it's absolutely great. The other half, I need him to make some structural changes too. But that's where we are. And I promised to do it this week because I'm absolutely full of cold and it's a good opportunity to sit down and not paint the town red or anything like that. So I can do that. So I will do that this week and we will get that moving. What happened when we produced the Far East? I said, look, when we produce the Far East, I'm going to want to take some time out of producing the next handbook to look at late war in Germany. I was very open about that. That's what I've been doing. That's what going to Gielenkirchen is all about. I wanted to produce some bite-sized campaigns. There's no point in producing the handbooks if we're not producing pint-sized campaigns, because the pint-sized campaigns are really the lifeblood of Chain of Command. That's what makes them exciting and playable. So going to Gielenkirchen has been part of that process. We'll get the pint-sized campaigns produced for that, and then we're going to move on to I'm going to move on to the Pacific. But it's how long is a piece of string? We've always said from the outset of TooFatLardies that what we produce is a result of our interest and our enjoyment. And because we're interested in it and because we enjoy what we're doing and we want to play those campaigns, we hope that the product comes out as better quality. Yeah, I want to get onto the Pacific, but I want to finish off this late 1944, early 1945 stuff as well, because that's always been my plan and that's my interest. Has it taken time? Yeah, of course it takes time. I spend most of my life looking at VAT returns and cobblers like that. When you run a business, you find that you're not your own boss. You're simply a tax collector on behalf of the government, and you're spending time filling out ridiculous paperwork about bollocks rather than doing anything that's productive. So that kind of slows things down a bit. And but that's where we are. Yes, there's lots coming. So we've got pint-sized campaigns there. I've got some more pint-sized campaigns for the Far East handbook. I really should be producing that before we go on to the Pacific. But I am very aware that people are waiting for the Pacific. There is an issue with the Pacific War Handbook. Chinese. I need to do a whole new tranche of research on the Chinese so that 8 people can play the Chinese in Burma. So my gut feel is I'm probably going to just leave the Chinese out because the rest of the handbook is pretty much finished. We just need to go through and do some tidy up play testing to make sure it all works with Chain of Command version 2. And then we'll produce the Chinese as a separate entity, maybe doing it more as a pint-sized campaign with that information, because the Chinese are not a major player in the war in the Pacific theatre. And whilst they are there in numbers in Burma, they're not hugely influential. Now, people are going to disagree with that, but that's
that controversial note.
In wargaming terms, how many games have you seen with people playing Chinese against the Japanese?
Well, that's a very good question.
And should I therefore stop people playing US Marines in the Pacific because I'm pissing about for 2 years researching the bloody Chinese? And I'm not going to do it. It's cobblers. So And there's
Well,
very little information available on the Chinese.
let's draw a veil over the Chinese theatre of World War II, which and Vinegar Joe Stilwell's
Yeah,
relationship
well,
with Chiang Kai-shek. Let's draw a veil over that, and let's go to Barry Hume, who has an excellent question with numerous different ways of updating the PSCs, the pint-sized
yeah.
campaigns to Chain of Command 2 going on. Will you guys produce a definitive article on how to do that, how to adapt?
No, what I plan to do is produce a definitive free to download piece saying this in this pint-sized campaign, make these changes. In that pint-sized campaign, make these changes. All I need is a 25th hour in a day and an 8th day in the week, and you'll have it on your desk tomorrow.
I can sense a certain amount of excitement brewing in the Ask Sidney sections here, Richard. Less so from Nick, but the next question is bound to be one which I think you're going to be very excited by, because Andy in Birmingham asks, the stuff being produced on the Patreon channel looks a lot like the stuff we got for free during COVID. Why do we now have to pay for the content? Do the panel think this is divisive? Well, in my usual way of pouring gasoline on a fire, what's the answer to that, Nick and Richard?
Nick, you start, because I need to. I need to.
Well, yeah. I was commenting the other day about how Twitter, for instance, was a real ghost town now for engagement. Back in the day when Twitter was a really, really nice place for all gamers to hang out. There we have lots of interaction, and you really felt part of that community.
Yeah.
Internet forums, etc., and blog posts are not what they were, I don't think either. What we have found, what we have opted towards with the creation of our own Patreon, is a focus place where we can create content that people can enjoy and share and bring the community to a place where we know where it is. I mean, Facebook is just so full of adverts that it frustrates the hell out of me every time I go on it. And there's lots of different spaces on Facebook. Facebook actually has quite a lot of wargaming stuff on there. Patreon is a space where we can be creative, where we can share ideas, put new stuff out there. For instance, Gielan is a great way of putting that through. The videos we're producing on that. We ask people to contribute. There's a free membership element, and we do make stuff available for free, which is, I think really important that we continue to do that, because we care massively about the community that is out there and people accessing our games and wanting to get more reward out of playing them. And we also produce stuff that we ask people to sign up for a membership for. So membership with our Patreon, if you're not already a member, we ask, there's only one tier of membership. You're either in or it's a free membership, or there's paid membership, and the paid membership is £5 a month. And for that, we are creating a whole number of products. And yes, it monetizes our content, but what it does is it enables us to keep that content going. It enables us to create the videos that we do. It enables us to create the output and the projects that we can support to put those through. And actually, that's probably, Richard's going to say more on this, I'm sure. But is that something people can buy into to be part of that? It's almost like an online war games magazine we're creating, really, and asking people to become part of the community to share with that. So Patreon, by its very model, does mean that you're either in it or you're out of it. You choose to join or you choose not to. But we massively believe that we can create a great community on there that we can grow and continue to support people that are playing our games with loads of good stuff.
Yeah, Nick, you're a Patreon member of We Have Ways, aren't you? The We Have Ways of Making You Talk. You
Yes.
support them on Patreon, don't you?
I do, yeah. And that's
what do you get
£5
for that, mate? What do you get for that?
I get to listen to the podcast without adverts.
Without adverts.
And there's a few and some other stuff. They do a live stream every so often as well.
You heard of a podcast called The Rest is Politics?
Yes.
Alistair Campbell and Rory, what's his name?
Stewart.
That's it. It's really good, actually. I've kind of been a bit switched on to getting myself a bit more up to speed on politics recently because of one particular lunatic, but we won't go there. I've been listening to that, and they have a Patreon channel. You know, it's what you get, ad-free listening. Brilliant. So we don't have adverts, so there's no point in giving anybody ad-free listening, because the only advert we have here is Mr. Fondler, you are so prominent, and who would want to miss that? And that's a rare. They give you early access to their shows. Well, great. So you get it like a couple of days before somebody else, which I suppose in politics is kind of worthwhile, because a week in politics is a long time in the world. You get live show tickets. You don't get them. You just get early access to them. I mean, we don't do that with Lardy Games Days. We don't say Patreon members get to sign up before anybody else does, because we don't want to do that. And you get a Discord community where you can argue with people about politics. And I think, well, what are you really giving us? And the answer's not a lot. What we're giving people is an awful lot. The whole idea for me was that we created an online magazine of content. You know, we had 8 articles on Panzer, how we built pint-sized campaigns, and a pint-sized campaign at the end of that. We have articles on building terrain, not articles, but videos. We have videos. We're currently doing the series where we went to Gielinkerken, and we've got free bonus scenarios with that. We look at armies. We look at we have a thing called the Reading Room, where we talk about the books that we're reading. We talk about the books that we're buying. We give books away as prizes. We've got a whole load of things on there. There are literally hundreds of articles on there already. But do you know the difference between the guys at We Have Ways, that's Al Murray and James Holland, just in case you don't know, and us? The difference is they're millionaires, and nobody complains about giving them any sodding money for what they're producing as mediocre benefits. So it's same with Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart. They've got money coming out their ears. We haven't. I'll tell you what the difference was between now and 4 years ago. We used to sell to the European Union. We used to sell to the United States. We used to sell to Australia, and postage rates were sensible enough that people would buy. We've lost those markets pretty much because we've got agents who are out there, which is great. And we really like working with those agents, but it reduces our profitability. We are trying to make our business still financially viable in times that are increasingly tough. And the only way to do that is by trying to find different streams of income. And for us, Patreon has been the way to do that. Yes, we did produce a load of stuff for free during COVID and lockdown. We benefited from COVID and lockdown, that a lot of people were buying stuff, and we wanted to give back to the community. And we wanted to do it from a moral point of view, that there are a lot of people who were isolated during those times, not seeing friends and family. And we wanted to try and make life a little bit more pleasant for them. Now, just because we used to give you something for free doesn't mean we can always give you something for free. That by definition, it's the same as buying Lard magazine or buying a set of rules. You have an option. You can choose to buy them, or you can choose not to buy them. But to say that we are wrong to try and find alternative income streams strikes me as a little bit unkind, when people quite happily give their money to millionaires who don't really seem to need it as much as we do. You know, we live very ordinary lifestyles. At no point do I drive Rolls Royces into my swimming pool, despite Nick's suggestion. And I've never even driven one into Sydney's swimming pool. So it's just another product on the shelf. And I was talking to Sid about this the other day, and Sid, who does subscribe, said that people who subscribe that he's spoken to love it and think it's really good. We get a retention rate of over 95%, which in Patreon terms is almost unheard of. So we are producing what many people think is a worthwhile product. And them supporting us allows us to continue to produce more material of this type. You know, the trip to Germany cost thousands of pounds, and that doesn't even include buying things like the magic drone and all that. This is money that we are investing in producing better products for the future. My Irish Aviation Authority drone pilot's license cost me 100 quid. This is not stuff that happens without investment. And what we're trying to do is to create an income stream that allows us to invest in the future of the business and produce material for people. So do I feel bad about doing that? I feel it's a shame that people see it as being divisive. But do I think they're being fair when they say that? No, I don't. I think they should go and ask Al Murray how he can afford it without their subscription, because we're no different to any other business. We have to try and find ways of generating income. Sydney, you're on mute.
You muted yourself, you plonker. No, you've unplugged your microphone or something.
How about now?
You're back.
Yeah, you're here. You're back in the room.
It was just so exciting. I must have muted myself. Apologies to everyone for that.
Muted yourself?
Muted, not
Oh,
neutered.
right.
Muted. Well, we're going to go from. I mean, we've had two thoroughly controversial questions.
I haven't finished yet. I haven't finished.
Oh Lord!
Because
people have lunch to cook.
Yeah. Okay. But let me say this, right? We want to do more with Patreon, and we want to know what people would like us to do more of as well. And the answer to that, by the way, is not give us more free content. We will continue to put stuff on there for the consumption of people who are members. So you can be a paying member or just a non-paying member. Non-paying members will continue to get stuff because we want to try and continue to grow the community.
Anything that's important for the rules will be on there for non-paying members, like FAQ or Chain of Command, which is also something that's in production. The errata for Chain of Command, that will be on there for non-paying members. Anything that is essential for you to play the rules will be there, and it will be free.
Yeah, and that's the best place to get it because it's where we're going to load it up to, and it's the only place you can be certain of finding it. So I hope people feel that they can join us because we want to do more with it. We want to get more stuff on. There are two very simplistic chat rooms on there. But we keep content going. We produce we produce content in the form of video. We produce blog style posts. As Richard said, there's lots of stuff about terrain building, etc., and rule ideas. What we're doing with board games is on there. We'd have Paul Hicks on there, for instance, as a sculptor. We talk to hobby heroes. So we'd like to know what people would like us to do more of. So please let us know your thoughts and please come with us on the journey. Makes it more fun.
Are we done?
Yeah, I think so. But it is an important point because it upsets me when people mention divisiveness, and it was never intended to be divisive. It's just it's just a rolling magazine. And, these things, the elves do not come down at night and produce this stuff for us. It's got to be worked on, and that costs money.
Can we have a third controversial question in a row? Why not, Sydney? Yes, let's. Satin, cotton or flannel? What is the pyjama choice of the discerning Sir Sidney Roundwood? Thank you, Conrad Kinch from Dublin. It is actually linen, I've got to say. Big fan of linen pyjamas in the summer. But there might be a silk pair around somewhere. But information on that is available only by personal interview, Conrad. So catch me at salute on that one.
Sydney's underwear Patreon channel.
Yes, that's right. How many tiers of membership do you have, Sid, on that?
Well, it's significantly more expensive than yours, I have to say. But there we go. Let's move on swiftly, very swiftly, in fact. Patrick Conroy asks from Ireland, with the Peninsular War stuff Richard's occasionally showing us, are there any releases planned for Sharp Practice 2? That's a really good question because we recently enjoyed a couple of games at the club of that and of Sharp Practice 2 set in the Peninsula, and they were great games. Really, really nice games. So, Richard.
Yes. We've already touched on what we're looking to do with non-player characters. I don't know what we'll call it, but something as a supplement to Dawns and Departures, maybe, which looks at the third-party participants. So I'm very keen to do that. But I'm actually also going to be running a campaign using Dawns and Departures on the Patreon channel. So what we'll probably do is put some articles up there explaining what we're doing for free for the free membership people. And then if they say, yeah, I like the idea of that, let's dip in and join it. It's less than the price of a pint of beer. So so that's something I'm very, very keen to be working on. as part of this development process, which as we've talked about, would also benefit things like Bonzo Bonkers and whatever.
I've been going on a bit of a learning curve with the Texan War of Independence as well, Sid, the Alamo, and doing that for sharp practice. And we've been doing that as our
Yeah.
retrospect for my Are You Up For It challenge last year. I still haven't finished it this year, but it's moving, it's getting there, and that's being shared on Patreon as well.
That's something I'd love to do more on. That
A
whole
great
Texas expansion, the Texas War of Independence, and what happens afterwards with the Comanche. Really, really interesting. Some fantastic books that I've read since we last talked about that. Really interesting part of American history I didn't know about. Really, really interesting. But that is for another show, because Stefan Staffan Gustafsson said, "What ideas from Koch Chain of Command 2 would you add to sharp practice if there ever was a sharp practice 3, like the ticking clock and things like that?" So if you can answer that question for Stefan.
Don't know, really. It'd be interesting. Perhaps we should give this a dabble while we do this NPC supplement. Yeah, I've not thought about it. So the answer is, would we introduce new ideas? I'm sure we will, because that's just the nature of it. Will there ever be a sharp practice 3? I don't know. I've not even thought about it. To be honest with you, we've done a few preliminary games setting up the background to the campaign that we're going to be running, and it's just great to get it back on the table. And you think, oh, theoretically, I've got these issues. Do I like the card system? Wouldn't it be easier to go to command dice? We did actually try that when we play tested Sharp Practice 2, and the command dice just sucked all the joy out of it in a narrative game. It just didn't work. Whereas in Chain of Command, the command dice work beautifully, but in for a more narrative, heroic thing, we weren't happy with it. And actually, we put it on the table, and I think, why did I ever ask myself that? It's great. I love it as it is. It's really, really good. So, but the ideas of the final countdown. I know a song about that. Yeah, well, interesting, isn't it? Final countdown. It's certainly it's a mechanism for putting pressure on and making a dynamic story come to a conclusion. So
Chain of Command and sharp practice are different things, and you can mix elements of them with care, can't you?
Yeah,
You know, I love chips. I love chips and I love custard, but I don't really want to dip my chips in my custard.
No, kippers and custard, I always say. You know, you like the two, but you would not want kippers and custard for breakfast.
Lord above. We've got the final 2 questions into the final straight, but we've kept 2 fantastic
Keep going, boys.
questions.
It's the final countdown.
We've got final 2. The final 2 are really good. So Jerry, who may be Jerry Jenkins in London, if it is, hi Jerry. But certainly Jerry in London.
There may be more. Jerry in London.
There may be more than one Jerry in London. So whoever Jerry is, welcome anyway. If the vast majority of Wargames rules appear to be penned by British or American writers, what effect does that have, or what corresponding consequences or thoughts does that have on the martial prowess of various armies in Wargames rules? Discuss. I think what Jerry's saying is, because we're British and American writers, do we make our armies win more? And it might also be to what extent are rules, which are Wargames rules, historical Wargames rules, focused perhaps, if not predominantly, but certainly with a slant towards Anglo-American conflicts, as opposed to, the wars of unification in the 14th century in the Ottoman Empire or something like that. So there's a couple of questions which it could be, but Jerry, being a man of great intelligence and discerning taste, has given us a great question which leads into all of those and more. So discuss, gentlemen.
Interesting, isn't it? Because the historically, it was always German troops who were overrated in First World War and Second World War games, even though the authors were British. I mean, there was a classic case of Bruce Quarry had a reputation for not just being slightly in favour of the Germans, but going quite beyond that in many respects. I mean, I'm going back to ancient history there, but I don't know, really. It's interesting, isn't it? Because what we try and do, certainly with Chain of Command, is look at national characteristics and find national characteristics which based on the training of that unit. But intriguingly, when you get to 1940, I mean, some of the British national characteristics, such as drinks cabinet, are not based on drill. But it was just based on the fact that when I read all these accounts, somebody would come around with a wheelbarrow full of scotch and say, "Cheer up, lads, here's a bottle of bloody famous grouse, and on he'd go to the next sort of outpost where they'd get a bottle of gin or something like that. And it happened so many times, you thought, okay, nobody's written this in the drill book, but it's very, very much part of the British Army's way of conducting things. We were in Geelenkirchen, and the American troops there, the 84th Rail Splitter Division, were operating under control of British forces. So when they went into attack, they went to get their cup of coffee in the morning, only to find out it was British rum, because they were going into battle and they were getting the British rum allowance. And it was quite interesting, actually, because a lot of the Americans thought, I know, I don't want to drink this. So they gave it to their mates who did. And they ended up with some people paralytically drunk because the idea of a rum ration is everybody's meant to drink their bit. You don't just give it to the few blokes who want it. So there's a sort of cultural thing there that different armies do things in a slightly different way. So sometimes what looks like a bit of a parody is actually based very much on historical documentation. But
I love Rich. I love Rich. The other story as well with that, where the guys, when the British get to Nijmegen in 1944, I remember that interviewing this chap. I can't remember what unit he was with, but he said two things that were brilliant. He said, we encountered the Americans in Nijmegen. First thing was all the officers were wearing helmets. He said, no British officer ever wear a helmet. All the American officers wore helmets. And the amazing thing was they'd been in Nijmegen for 2 days and they hadn't set up an officers' club.
yeah. Yeah,
I can't remember who that chap was, but it's gold dust.
That was still going on in the Gulf War when the Brits turned up, and the first thing they did was they had a lorry there where they dropped down the sides, and it was the officers' mess, and they got all the optics in there and of course the Americans fight dry, so the British. A pal of mine was former Royal Navy, and he said that they always used to get a lot of visitors from American ships when they were in port and the Americans were there, because they knew if they came on a British ship, they'd get access to a very large quantity of booze, whereas the US ships were dry. So it's we have different ways, different cultural reasons for having different ways. And to go back to the original question, do we write rules where the British are better than their opponents because we are British? I hope not. I think you have to be a bit more discerning than that. Where I write the British up as being good, so for example, in the Geelenkirchen campaign, they're very good. It's because they were very good. They were very, very good indeed. Not just at tactical level, but at operational level and command level as well. This is the end of 1944. These people know what they're doing. They've been doing it for 6 years. 5 years.
I guess there's a choice, isn't there, sometimes for games designers, whether you want to critically evaluate the history that you're reading, or whether you want to ride the social, the stereotype. And I guess sometimes it's easier to ride the stereotype than it is to critique and say, actually, you know what, something else might be at play here. But to do that, you have to really invest in the research for the history. And of course, we're all shaped by what we read. And predominantly what we read will be English and American sources because that's what's available. Plus, of course, the sources, as we know throughout history, are written by the people that tend to win, and they tend to come with their own set of prejudices as well. So I think you can apply interesting to look at some of the other wars from history and say, well, to what extent as the winner created the narrative and the narrative plays out on the war games table, that same narrative plays out.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, actually.
But equally, there are many, many popular books translated from German into English, which are simply apologist examples of writing by people who fought in the Second World War and want to continue to present themselves in the best possible light. So it's not just the winners who write the history, because I bet you companies like Stackpole Books and some of these, organizations in the publishing world that churn out this Nazi apologist shit. And that's not referring to them, that's referring to the other companies out there. But there is a lot of Nazi apologist shit out there. So it's not just the winners who try and big up their involvement.
Well, that's hopefully very helpful to Jerry in London. Thank you for that. But the last question, we should so to some extent save the best from last, because I think all three of us have different views on this, is from Chris, also in London, which is a big place.
Oh, blimey.
Oh,
Mary Poppins.
yeah, it's a very, very big place. I've been there. Very big.
So
Very
Chris
big.
asks,
Oh, big. Biggest city ever.
so Chris,
Oh,
who
top
may or
of
may not be a close neighbour of Jerry from London, Chris says, my local War Games club has recently rebadged to be just a gaming club. The word war was dropped to reflect the wider range of games that could be played, even though 90% of what we do is still very much traditional wargaming. Would you see this as a positive step or a sidelining of what is still our core area of gaming? Now, this is something that is quite a difficult topic because we've talked about this a number of times in the past. And I am on the shelf on this, sorry, on the shelf. I'm on the fence on this one, maybe on the shelf as well in all sorts of different ways. But certainly
Not
on
in the closet.
certainly on the fence on this, because I think there are merits to describing ourselves as being historical miniature wargaming, and merits to say wargaming, and also merits to say gaming. But before I chip in, I was going to ask Nick and Rich, what do you think to this excellent question?
I think it's an excellent question.
It is.
I really do think it's an excellent question. Yeah, does that answer it, Sid?
It is a genuine question from Chris, and that
It's,
doesn't answer
I
it.
think,
That
yeah,
Chris is
well,
clearly a discerning man of considerable intelligence, and there's no
I,
way that he's going to be satisfied with that bit of
okay,
flannel. So come
okay.
on,
So,
Carolina Levitt,
well, okay, all right.
let's go a bit further down the line and be a bit more serious about it.
Okay, I give myself both labels. I am a gamer and I am a war gamer. Now, gamer, of course, also these days tends to often relate to people that are playing console. Are they called console games?
Mm,
PlayStation type stuff, for
yeah,
gamers.
yeah.
Um, Whereas I'm definitely a tabletop gamer. I love board games. I love gaming. My family and I enjoy games with my family. Some of them have a kind of classic board game theme, and some don't. I guess from my perspective, I tend to play fairly general board games like Catan and Ticket to Ride and that kind of stuff, and then I'll play historical war games. I don't tend to play other games in the middle that are figure-based games that are not historical. Um, does it bother me that clubs exist? Well, I think clubs have to cater to those people that are interested. And I like to believe that historical gaming draws people in from the broader gaming hobby. I hope that is the case. I've seen that happen, um, but I don't know that it's the path that everybody takes. And I know that war is a difficult subject for some people to come to terms with. I know that, for instance, I'm a great believer that the Imperial War Museum has massive self-doubt because of the words imperial and war, which are both kind of difficult terms for it to live with in the modern society. And I think wargaming maybe suffers from a little bit of that same brush as well. I don't know. I'm a little bit open-minded on it, really. What do you guys think?
I I would describe myself as an historical wargamer
Mm.
because that defines who I am. I do play other games, but that doesn't define who I am. So, for example, I will quite happily play Tapeworms of the Western Front, as we've discussed in a previous episode, but it that doesn't define who I am. I think one of the advantages of being a club or a society is you don't have to appeal to everybody. So you can be a bit loud and proud about what you are and what you really are. If what you really are is a historical war games club, say it. We're not allowed to, funnily enough. When we set up our club in the local community centre that we use, there was a big argument. One of the members on the committee was very hot as a member of SIT campaign for nuclear disarmament. And ever since then, it's been agreed that we are allowed to use the facilities and rent them out and hire them, but they will not put War Games Club as on their website or on any of their paperwork because it's seen as being a political hot potato. I think maybe it was in 1984, but I'm not sure it is today. But yeah, there is an issue with the word war in somebody's eyes, and war is an unpleasant thing. But we're not gaming the unpleasant aspect of it. That's another argument altogether. We're gaming the intellectual challenge of it, and reproducing the history. But so. What do I feel? I do feel that this is not a question about should a club be called X or Y. This is indicative of the changes in the hobby, which sees that people, that historical wargaming needs to fight its own corner. Historical wargaming needs to show that it is attractive and it's worthwhile playing, and I think we do that best, going back to a question we had earlier, by making games interesting, fun, and challenging and pertinent to the history. If we don't do that, if we simply produce games that are reskinned version of other games because people feel it's like putting on a pair of old comfy slippers and there's no challenge there, they can just, a bit like Monopoly. I haven't played Monopoly in years, but we could set the board up now and I would know exactly how to play it. It's indicative of the fact that if we are going to dumb down war games and make them not challenging and not interesting, why the flipping heck would anybody play them? Why not go and play Carcassonne or Ticket to Ride or Catan? But make games interesting, make games challenging, make games replayable, make games fun, and people will come and play it. So I think there's a big issue there that historical wargaming is maybe its own worst enemy when it tries to present more simple games because they think a lower barrier to entry is what will benefit the hobby in large. Because I don't think it will benefit the hobby in large. I think all it does is it make games trivial and more disposable, as we've discussed in the past.
I think one of the issues here is the game in the box philosophy. The game in the box, the whole game is in the box. So I can buy tapeworms of the Western Front or whatever, and everything I need for that is in the box. Now, I don't think you can ever really get a World War II war game that's entirely in the box, because to actually be able to understand it, develop it, play it, you've got to be able to have that awareness and understanding of the Second World War. Same with Napoleonics. You can't really, without that broader understanding of world politics or the way that Napoleonic wars occurred, you're not going to be really able to step into that game in the way that it's been intended. Whereas if I play Ticket to Ride, all I need to do is open the box, read the rules, play the game. That's it. There's no other investment required. There's no research needed. And actually, it's a really nice way, really simple way for me to do it.
You don't need to understand. You don't need to understand how 19th century railway systems evolved. I tell you what, there is an elephant in the room here, and this is war game shops. War game shops. We use our local war game shops quite a lot, and I had a chat with a guy who runs it there. I said, "Would you be interested in stocking our stuff?" He said, "No." I said, "Oh, right, really?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "You don't have a tournament scene." He said, "We thrive. You don't have a tournament scene. You don't have a range of figures." He said, "We thrive on people buying figures from us and then playing tournaments with us using the rules. You don't have that. Therefore, we're not interested in stocking your rules." And that I have seen replicated in an awful lot of the most modern war game stores. Now, they have got an imperative, which is to make money, and they have got a very, very simple business model, which is to get people playing boxed rule sets off the shelf with a range of figures from which they can expand on that, and playing in a competitive environment. I think that we are in danger of showing the next generation coming through that all war games are in a box and all war games are competitive, and that is the biggest threat to historical wargaming we have.
I take a different view. I don't think we're living in that ghost town. All the clubs have not been closed down, as they would say. Because I think that there's a huge point here about accessibility. I think there's also a question of a wider gaming community and the diversity in gamers and gaming as a hobby and gaming individuals. I do think there's kind of a crossover to business as well. I mean, the game in a box variety of gaming. I think it's been hugely successful and has resurrected, to some extent, miniatures gaming and board gaming and role playing as well. That accessibility for people who are perhaps space poor or time poor or just attention poor. And I do think it's better that people have a social interaction which is based around gaming. It's great if it's historical wargaming, but I'm the sort of person who thinks, well, history is kind of a difficult guide in a lot of ways because, as we mentioned already on this Oddcast, it's written by the winners. It's probably written in a different language to English if you want to look outside a Euro-centric kind of history, and it's a difficult thing to follow. And it's also infused with lies, with myth, with legend, and with the passage of time. So history as a guide is not completely impartial. And I think there is a real synchronicity between games which are based around legends and myths and history, because if the further back in time you go, there's more of the history and the myth and less of the empirical evidence. So I think there's a lot of crossovers, and creating all of that in an accessible package, which doesn't mean that you have to do a degree in history or have had to read 5 or 6 different books, is, I think, a really promising development.
But that doesn't mean, but the problem is if they exclude anything that doesn't fit that format.
Well, that is entirely correct. I mean, it is a label which is a dangerous sort of label, because it tends, albeit that it suggests that it's inclusive, could be taken to be really limiting the boundaries of what gaming is. Gaming does include historical miniature wargaming.
For a lot of people's horizons who are going into those game stores and have no experience outside that, their horizons are limited by what they see on those shows.
But they wouldn't think that when they come to Salute, because there's as much, there's a lot of non-historical miniature wargaming, but there certainly is a lot of historical miniature wargaming in quite old style at Salute as well.
We'll see.
My wishes for society is that we continue to learn from the past. And what we do in historical wargaming, I think, is one avenue that keeps that connection to the past open. I know if I had 2 people in a room, and one of them was somebody who appreciated and understood threads in world history, and the other person knew how to play Mansions of Madness, I know which one I'd rather rely on to put together my foreign policy. But so it's a rather crude way of putting it, Sid. But I think actually, there's more to this. I'm getting a bit on a soapbox really, but there's more to historical gaming than just gaming history. And I think that's what sets us. I think that's what I feel makes me different to another gamer, is that the connection it gives me to the history means that actually that's the focus. That's why I historically game, because I'm fascinated by the history and what happened in the history and how we replicate those challenges. And I don't get that same challenge from, well, my personal view. I don't get that same challenge when I'm facing down a group of orcs or trying to find my way through a dungeon. Personally, it doesn't work for me.
No, that's fair. And generally, I feel the same way. But I don't exclusively feel the same way. And I think a lot of people over the years have probably would say that they are in both of our camps, but certainly there's a camp in saying that there's some benefits to describing the hobby as being part of gaming, and people may come to historical miniature wargaming through other forms of gaming. Whereas if you see it as being an exclusive, and I'm not saying this because I don't think people do this, if you put it on any sort of pinnacle as being aspirational in its own right, I think there's always a danger that some people will say, well, you started on Warhammer and then you moved up to whatever you move up to, and then finally you arrive at historical miniature wargaming. I think that creates an unfortunate impression, or could create an unfortunate impression that it's better. It's not better, it's just different. Which
is why games, on the gaming scale, you have games that kids can get into and play and enjoy, which are non-historical. And then we know that there are, I can't draw out that pathway, but we know that we all individually follow a pathway that those of us who are in historical gaming, we've all followed a pathway that's taken us there. The pathway that we got as old farts, talk about games in a box, the next generation will be the ones in the box. So, it's what the youngsters play, how they want to develop their own gaming. I think it's really important that we maintain the ladder. The ladder's got to stay open for people who want to come in to historical gaming. Where are they going to come into it from? They're probably going to come into it from people who enjoy playing games and also have an historical interest.
Is it a ladder, Richard, or is it really a circle?
There's no right or wrong answer, is there? Of course, what should the club be called? Well, call it what you fucking like.
The West London Flower Arranging
Yeah, why not?
Collection
Why not?
Collective.
It'd be a lot more diverse. You'd get a lot more flower arrangers turning up to a historical war games club. Great. If that's what you want, change the name, get new people, start playing netball or whatever. Call it the
The
Netball
Ancient
Club.
and Honourable Society of Stoat Chokers.
Well, that was our original club name, yeah, which didn't really tell you what we did apart from choking the stoat, which was
What
an
you'd always-
unfortunate euphemism.
There's a guy who Michael Harker, who's on Blue Sky up in Glasgow, and he photographs the games in Glasgow at the club every week. And there's a great collection of games, and some are board games, and some are historical miniature games, and some are World War II naval, and some are chain of command, and some are fantasy. And people don't necessarily just sit at the one table. I mean, I don't know the gentleman at all, but they're great photos. So yeah, the diversity, and I can't remember what he calls the club, and to some extent, Richard, you're right. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter what the club's called.
As long as you're enjoying yourself. But I do think that historical wargaming needs to promote itself in order to make itself attractive in a world where there's so much big and colourful and bright and blasé in the world of gaming generally. Because the world of gaming is becoming more attractive, far more polished in terms of the way it looks, compared, because historical wargaming comes from that amateur background. And I think this is a lot about the Patreon question. You're a wargamer, you're a hobbyist, you're just posting stuff. You know, the Patreon thing is just your blog, but it isn't just my blog, because I've got to pay the fucking bills. So it's also a stream of income. But this is the background that historical wargaming comes from, that amateur background, and I think making that transition from amateur to professional is a long gestation period, and I think it's still ongoing.
And talking of being professional, Sid, let me be professional now by taking us full circle. In 2 weeks' time, you and I are going to have a lovely breakfast, after which we're going to go to the Excel Centre in London and walk through the door at the UK's biggest gaming or war gaming, I don't know what it says actually, show. And we should, I think, pay particular attention when we go around that show. What are we looking at? What are we seeing? What games are we seeing being played? Where are the historical games? Where are the other forms of games? What are we seeing about that? And maybe we should do a special
report back
panorama on that.
Report back.
Yeah.
That's an excellent idea. And this pays tribute to all of the questions today. They were really excellent questions. Thank you for everyone for sending them in. And thanks in particular for the last two. Hard to pick out winners, but Jerry and Chris, thank you so much for those questions. They're both really good.
And you know, no easy ride, and I like that.
And also worth saying that we know we have more questions, and we've already been going for 2 and a bit hours. So if your question didn't get read out this time, sorry about that. We hope we've spoken about stuff that you can still find enjoyable.
Well, that's all we've got time for, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. We will see you in 2 weeks, as they say, at Salute at the London Excel Centre. But now I shall say goodbye to Richard and Nick, and also, gentlemen, you can wave farewell before we're played out by Roger Barraclough and the band as ever. Thank you. Goodbye.
In tonight's show, Sidney Roundwood is joined by Nicholas Skinner and Richard Clark. Music by Roger Barraclough and his band.